All right, everybody, welcome to another amazing episode of Roll or Die. Today we have the esteemed Muhai Ballenden from Brazil, as he's known. Actually, he's not from Brazil, but that's how they announce him over the mic in Brazil. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm sure I'd be much better if that was my name.
Were you teased much for your name growing up?
Murray Ballenden, all right, is the way I've been told to introduce him. Actually, head coach, Dominance in Bentleigh East, and great pleasure to have you on the show, brother.
Thanks, good to be here.
Thank you.
Roll or die. It often feels like you're dying when you're rolling, doesn't it?
Yeah, maybe the O should be changed, or the or should be changed to and.
And yeah.
Especially at the moment, coming back from lockdown. So you're here in Melbourne with us. And how have you found that returning back to the mats did you take time off, or were you still sort of managing to get some training in through the lockdown?
I was managing to with the jiu-jitsu doesn't have professional athletes, but under the guidelines with professional athletes, people who coach and get paid to coach falling under those guidelines. This was probably the lockdown where I was able to do most. During the others, I drew a very hard line and just didn't. But this time I felt like, from a mental health perspective, more than any of the others, I really needed it. So selfishly, I found a crew that were able to do the same. And we stuck, did everything right by the guidelines, everyone double vaccinated, all that kind of jazz. And it was a godsend for all of us. So felt like we actually came out with some new skills, which was pretty cool. Finally delved into the world of leg locks, which has been a lifesaver, coming out on the other side and wrestling with people who all of a sudden who are very esteemed at it. But yeah, so I stayed pretty active, and I feel like in general, the people, like the members, have done a better job, and I've done a better job of managing their return this time. I tried to after the previous lockdowns, but everyone's so excited to get back on the mat, and so much pent up energy and frustration and all, and they unknowingly take it out on each other. And there were a few wasted bodies after the last few returns. So this time there's been I feel like everyone's done a really good job of returning sensibly, and they're all moving really well. It's great.
That's great. Is it my question, Kim? I'm not sure.
Yeah, your turn. Yeah, okay, cool. It is your turn.
So the Bentleigh East gym, like, it seems to me like my office is literally 100 meters away from there.
Mate.
Yeah, although
why haven't we seen you yet?
Yeah, I never go to work. But I have an office there. And so
You're gallivanting around all the time, Anton. What's going on here?
But the thing is, anyway, that gym opened at a really interesting time in amongst all of these lockdowns and everything. What's the journey been like, I guess, for you, like trying to get a gym launched during that craziness?
Frustrating, because on the one hand, it shows our survival, shows the solidarity of the membership and the community there. So that's been awesome from that perspective. We're looking at it purely from a business perspective. Moved into this with Dave, the original spawning of Dominance. Partly, hugely because I wanted to finally actually do, work in my passion. I'd done a lot with strength and conditioning before, and had a gym for 5 or so years that had teetered on doing well, but had never kind of broken through. So we spent a lot of time and coin, obviously, getting the place set up, and it was one of the we started out incredibly successfully. Like before opening, had a lot of members, and interestingly, people who had never done jiu-jitsu before. So the pre-sales and the actual opening of the gym was very successful, and the first year was great. And throughout all the lockdowns, I think we remained quite a stable business. The last one was particularly hard, and we're climbing back well from, but was particularly hard because just before it hit, we had a very charismatic Muay Thai coach, and who had helped develop quite a strong Muay Thai program. He had a friend who left his business. It was about 6 or 7 minutes down the road, and he ended up taking that over. So you can imagine there were a fair few members who followed him. And I feel like with the lockdown hitting and maybe Delta variants and all that kind of, people were just over it. So we copped a lot of cancellations in that first month or so. And so now we kind of find ourselves back at, if I'm being totally honest, not sure how David appreciate me saying that, but we find ourselves back at below first year levels.
Okay. Well, man, I think
that's probably pretty standard for many businesses, though. Yeah, especially
it's pretty interesting because we've been open for 3 years, close to, and you know, from that perspective, the business, as I said, I'm proud of proud of the membership and the community that we've built and how it's managed to maintain itself through such a tricky time. We've got some work ahead of us to get back to where we were and make a big thing of it.
I think everybody's obviously. That's one of the things we can do is all the RoD people. Let's rally and let's get Dominance Bentleigh pumping back to year 3 level. Oh no, that doesn't work. Let's make year 4 epic. That's the goal. That's one of the things we can do.
Yeah, but I mean, there definitely is a demand out there because, so Dominance in Richmond or Abbotsford or wherever it is, that's huge. I mean, there's so many members there, and I guess you've been around so long, Murray, that you can see that the growth of jiu-jitsu out into the suburbs, because I started at Peter Devine in St Kilda at the time when there was pretty much just Devine and Dominance, maybe a couple of others around, smaller ones, but they were the 2 big ones. And now, I mean, you can't go 5 meters without finding a jiu-jitsu gym almost every corner.
I was avoiding, no disrespect to the smaller clubs, but I was doing my best to avoid the bigger names. And obviously our friends and sister clubs like Immersion and things like that, which is part of the reason why we ended up out where we are. And then literally 2 weeks before we opened the doors, Dave sends me a message and he's like, I just thought I'd let you know about this club here and this one here. And there's a East Side Jiu-Jitsu is literally about 700 meters up the road from us. I didn't even know they existed. They opened up at the same time. So, obviously plenty of members to share around because both are still going. So,
yeah, good stuff.
I guess not so much jiu-jitsu gyms as more MMA gyms. So, is there much MMA at Dominance Bentleigh, East Bentleigh? Like, what's the setup there?
We've actually, since it's the only one of the 3 locations that doesn't offer Muay Thai. And we decided to give that a go after what I explained to you before, and just see what happens if we offer something that's more attached to the core of jiu-jitsu. And do another grappling-based art, obviously striking and grappling, but grappling-based art. So the MMA program is very new, run by Mikey Manu, who's obviously a very accomplished MMA fighter. He's an awesome coach, and he's done a good job of getting the program up and running so far.
Cool.
but literally it's like 3-4 weeks into its inception. So early days, but the members have received it really well.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, where I was at Peter Bean, they only ever do just jiu-jitsu. They don't have any MMA there. It's sort of, I think, because they were one of the originals, and it feels like MMA has kind of evolved in the last 10 years. So back when it was just grappling, they didn't sort of amalgamate it together. So,
Yeah.
So with I heard you talk once before, and I don't know, hopefully you're comfortable to share a bit, but I think I heard you talking on, because you're part of the Eat Sleep Train. Is that the name of the podcast? The Dominance Eat Sleep Train?
Yep.
I think you were talking a bit about you dealt with chronic fatigue. I think you dealt with chronic fatigue. Is that right?
Yeah.
So what's that experience like being a jiu-jitsu? I presume you're a black belt at the time. I don't know. Does this still impact you? What's that experience all like? Can you talk a bit about that for our listeners, please?
Jiu-jitsu is hard, I think, emotionally and mentally as it is, depending on the type of person. But I think for most people, they have their dark days.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when it started happening, the thing that sort of, I suppose, made me realize something wasn't right is that wrestling with people that I usually found, no disrespect to them, but it was like an easy role, was suddenly a battle for my life type of thing. Like, it was really hard. And everyone's had tired days where they think about what they should do, or they see the opportunity and then they react far too late. They feel like they're dragging themselves through mud type of thing. It was like that at the start, and I'd often it affected me a lot because a lot of my identity was through jiu-jitsu. So I actually found myself semi-often exhausted and sitting in the car having a little cry to myself.
Wow.
wondering what the hell was going on.
Yes, I can understand.
And then eventually went and got a whole bunch of tests done. And for the first 3 years, I sort of had there was a bit of a runaround. I had nothing diagnosed, but I got my black belt 2006. And a year late, and it had already started happening a little bit, but the next year was when it really started hitting me strongly. And I remember the last competition I did then was the Pan Pacs in 2007. And usually you're ramping up training. And I remember spending the last 2 to 3 weeks just sleeping on the couch throughout the day.
Wow.
And my training was, I'd make sure I had like 2 half-hour sessions of visualization. And that's, I sort of intuitively, I felt like I knew if I was going to get through the day, that's what I needed to do leading up to it, rather than actually roll. Weirdly enough, managed to have one of my best performances that year.
Wow! With chronic fatigue,
and then,
amazing. You had your
and
best
then and then I stopped. And about 3 years later, I got a proper diagnosis. And I'd say, all in all, it took about 5.5 to 6 years to get to the point where I was exercising semi-normally again. By which stage we'd started a family, which in itself had been troublesome because the chronic fatigue had left. Had given me adrenal and testicular fatigue, so I wasn't producing any goodies.
All right, yeah.
There were lots of flow-on effects. So family only started once the proper healing kind of started. And I'm not sure, like, I haven't had anyone specifically say that there are sort of, like, haven't tested to see that there are lingering effects. But I feel like since then I have a problem with overtraining myself anyway. Like when I'm feeling
we
good,
all do, brother. We all do.
When I'm feeling good, I feel feeling mentally strong. It feels natural to me to want to challenge myself and do more.
Yeah.
So there's been a long, I hate using the word, but a long journey in terms of discovering how much I can take and how much I can't. And I have found
journey or discovery. Which sorry.
Journey. I feel like I'm on MasterChef whenever I say journey. You know, how's your MasterChef journey been? It shits me. Yeah. But I can't think of another word, so there it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so go on.
Every 6 months, every 6 months or so, for the past 5 years, I've felt like I've had a little bit of a collapse that takes me about 4 weeks to climb out of.
Okay.
And weirdly enough, I feel like the recent lockdown, without the traditional class format and with a slightly different approach to the training, has built my stamina and endurance in a way that has allowed me to take on some pretty intense sessions of late and actually pull up okay from them, which is unusual.
That's very interesting.
Well, when I hear that story, I mean, especially combined with what you talked about at the beginning of taking on a business in 2019 and what you've had to go through, like the only word I can think of is just like resilience and tenacity. Like psychologically, have you got any tips for anybody out there who's going through, like 1/10 of what you've just described? Because that's just amazing. Like, how did you do it?
Yeah. I think I'm I would say not very well, but well in the end, because, I obviously come out the other side. I am very stubborn. It did, I think there'd be few people that have gone through the experience, come out the other side who haven't, I'm a better PT and a better coach because of it. It's forced me to do a lot of research, a lot of learning, and a lot of practice with various nutrition and strength and conditioning and training methods to see what works for me, what works for others. I suppose the biggest driving force for me to get better and to learn all of that was to get back on the mat. I think there was a while there for about, it actually makes me a little bit emotional, for about 3 years where I was solidly depressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't enjoy life.
Yeah.
Well,
I really got that.
Yeah, that was really tough. Dave would often come over and talk about going to the Worlds with his crew, who they were going to train with, and I'd be like excited, but then he'd leave and I'd storm around the house like, fucking fuck, just so want to be a part of it and knew that I couldn't.
Wow.
So yeah, there was a lot of pain and a lot of to move away from, and a lot of pleasure that pulled me towards actually getting myself better, learning how to get myself better. And the unfortunate thing for people in a similar position is that very few know what they're doing in terms of helping people with fatigue issues. And yeah, so a lot of it is self-learned and experimental, because you don't know necessarily what's made your system give up.
Yeah.
And what to do to kind of nourish it again. But and I think I kind of kept that story for myself for a long time, in terms of identifying myself as someone who was wrecked like that. What it has done is left a healthy fear of being tired. So if I had to do a lot of just experimenting with and learning what levels of fatigue are acceptable and what is normal and expected fatigue and what is me going down the gurgler again, which I've missed many times and ended up having to do some recovery again.
Sure.
But so I just, jiu-jitsu has a very strong place in my soul for me.
Yeah.
As does movement in general. I don't feel mentally or physically well if I'm not doing something that I'm not doing something expressive with my body. So that's been a very strong motivator in terms of the resilience involved.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, man, you must be so inspiring for people who have gone through chronic fatigue, but also, I mean, just as a 48-year-old grappler, right? I'm finding I'm continually having to reinvent my view of grappling as well. Like, it feels like you just went through stuff that we're all going to have to go through at some point if we're in love with expressing ourselves through movement, you know? Like you're better prepared for getting older now than I was, you know what I mean? Because but the lockdown had the same impact. Like, the lockdown had me reading a lot of books, studying a lot of things, and moving in different ways, more like for longevity purposes and flexibility and stuff. And I was like, actually, I fucking really like this new version of me, and I'm a better grappler than I've ever been, and I'm not burning the gas tank out trying to keep up with 20-year-olds. I'm trying to solve them like a puzzle now. Right? And then I'm going to have to reinvent myself in another 5 years and then another 10 years or whatever. I'm just going to keep having to do it. But man, I just acknowledge you for being so connected to that journey. I don't know what else words to use either.
Yeah.
Man, that's super inspiring, man. And I'm so grateful that you're one of my idols now. Let's put it that way, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? The getting older. I feel like being pulled out of the sport at 27 and coming back. I had a few sort of 3-month stints in between there where I would always make poor decisions in terms of coming back and going, who's the best in Melbourne right now? And I'd go and train with them. And obviously, 3 months later, be totally dead. So have to take time off again. Yeah. But otherwise, essentially started back after 9 years. And so it took a long time. I think it took slow learner. It took me and slow. It takes a long time for me to change and accept things. And I don't like change in general. So to get used to the idea that this is what I was able to do when I was 26, 27, and now I'm returning at 36, 37, and the game, like jiu-jitsu, had basically flipped itself on its head compared to what I knew. So I'd go and roll with the guys at Immersion who would just, using terminology and doing things that it felt like I was learning a completely new art.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it took that was a huge adjustment period. It's been very interesting to try and pull myself out of the archaic period.
Yeah. And I mean, you've got so much more that we could talk about just in terms of your life and off the mat stuff, but like on the mat. So we pretty much always ask our guests how they started. And I mean, you got your black belt in 2006. So when did you start? Like, you must really be one of the OGs of Melbourne.
In New Zealand. And I was based in Christchurch for about 15 years. And a friend of mine, my best friend at the time, was a very good judoka. In fact, he had started he was one of those that had the skill to go to the Olympics and had been given the choice, you take this seriously, we're going to start training for the Olympics, and at that point he just decided, I'm not willing to put the effort in for that. So he went and started an art in the city called shoot fighting. And at a place called the Academy under a guy called Jeff Aitken. So he was my first coach. Awesome man, big Neanderthal gorilla of a dude. And he so I went along, and Nick, my friend, took me along, said it was the most amazing thing he had tried. So I went along and tried this shoot fighting, and at the same time was doing like Muay Thai and weaponry and just everything I could. So I don't know if you remember, but back in the day with shoot fighting, we had like the black gis with the big baggy sleeves, and they finished about halfway down the forearm, and then wore whatever shorts you wanted.
Yeah.
And just an obscure, like, well, early days MMA, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then I think it was 19. May have been 1999 or 2000 even. John Will came out for his first New Zealand seminar tour. And I remember doing that and just was like mind blown. Instantly fell in love with it. And I was like, that is the most amazing stuff I've ever seen. And the whole school kind of became a bunch of jiu-jitsu fanatics. And then I left New Zealand with the intention of actually trying to get to the United States. And I never got it. I never made it past Melbourne.
Wow. Well, lucky for that.
Well, I came here with the intention of training specifically under John. But my head was stuck in a competitive, like I wanted to compete. And the guys at the hangar where I was training then, which was often referred to as the swamp, because it seemed that everyone there, minus little Dave and myself, was 6 foot plus and 100 plus kilos. That most of Melbourne's good competitors were there. So that's where I stayed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what about competing? Did you, like, on the MMA side of the shooter box, all that stuff, like, did you compete only in jiu-jitsu, or did you go into other areas?
I did MMA once. I felt like I had to kind of fake the aggression. I wasn't ready for I trained it very well, and like if people clocked me, like got a good shot in training, I rose to the occasion well, but no real desire to hurt someone. I know that sounds weird, because in jiu-jitsu, like, to win, you potentially destroy someone's limb.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I had one match at Valetudo long time ago in Dunedin.
Judo. No rules, right? That's no rules at all.
Yeah.
Wow. Shit.
And that was an eye-opening night, because, you know, except for my match, everything was pretty one-sided in terms of victories. Like one dude, I remember in the match before me, one of my coaches broke the dude's arm, but he let go, and then he got up and did a double leg and knocked himself out, clean out on the canvas. So, you know, there's a guy standing there with a busted arm, and he's having his hand raised. The guy's totally unconscious on the... Yeah.
Holy shit.
So it was just mayhem.
Oh.
Mayhem. And most of the matches were like that, where people had been totally... they just weren't well matched at all. Like a brand newbie against a about to turn professional boxer, and the guy just, you know, coming out looking like he's stuck his face in a beehive type of thing. So wow. Walking into the cage as a first timer after seeing those, I think I was a bit like, what the fuck? Like, what is about to happen? Yeah. So, but otherwise, only jiu-jitsu after that.
Well, hang on a second. What actually did happen? You can't leave us there, man. What actually happened when you stepped in the cage?
I went against a very tall, gangly guy who was clearly ready to inflict some pain, and I was not. And so I think most of it was me negating his strikes. Like, I did a good job from a grappling perspective and dominated from that perspective. And I don't think he actually laid a strike on me from what I remember, because he was on top and closed guard a reasonable amount. I had some good solid submission attempts, and remember listening to another guy that I got some coaching from, who I cinched up a couple of subs that were done. Like, the match was done, except for his advice to me, for instance, with a Kimura, was not to keep my legs shut, but to take him out and put my hooks in, so that if the person rolled, I could follow.
Right.
You get an idea of the level of my understanding, that I thought that was good advice.
Wow. So you had a sub locked in, like closed.
It was done, and I took. So of course he rolls out of it, and it's too slippery and mad for me to follow.
Yeah.
And then I took punishment for it. I tell you what, it's an experience. Escaping mount's hard, but escaping mount while being punched in the face, that's a different kettle of fish. So I remember moments like my head getting bobbed back and forward, and I'm like, oh, this is much harder than I thought it would be.
So good.
Anyway, the guy ended up getting given the decision, and then I heard that the last time we went to a submission grappling tournament together, he told my coach he hadn't been able to sleep with covers on his legs for the last 3 months because they were so bruised.
There you go.
So,
there you go.
I don't know what I did to him, but he was, yeah.
It was those nasty hooks.
Yeah, that's right. Those hooks.
Yeah, just the first time I'd ever done leg kicks, actually try and hurt someone.
What about jiu-jitsu comps, Murray? Like, you said that you'd done some jiu-jitsu, so tell us about those in the early days compared to now. How do the comps compare?
Well, you didn't have to wait around as long for matches, I'll tell you that much. That's for sure. Pan packs has always been bad. No, that's always been a shocker, but it's exponentially worse now. At least the benefit now is that they give you an arrival time, you get an idea of when you can arrive, because you've got a general live idea of when you might be getting on the mat. So that's pretty cool. But I think there was a reasonable amount more anonymity, because there was no records for people that you could check up on or see what the person had done before, or videos of them on YouTube or anything like that. And it was for me in general, the initial competing was a lot of fun because it was about me. And then it started to be about others expecting me to compete because I did well, and me feeling so much of that pressure that they're like, always saying you'll win, that I started to do not so well. It'd be like up and down. And I don't really think so. I'd have occasionally good performances, and then more often than not average ones, because I let the pressure get to me too much. But the fondest memories of that was just being involved with a team and competing with my friends, and training up for it with them.
Hopefully that's still the same for people today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I love that. We've only got 1 minute 55 to go, but it seems to me like the beginning of the journey was about you. Then the journey, no, not journey. We're not saying journey. Then the I don't know, the story of your BJJ life.
There we go. Sorry.
Others telling you to compete. Now it seems like the story of your BJJ life is about being a contribution to others. Which part of this is your favorite part? Where are we at in the story of Muay Ballenden?
Yeah, definitely not doing it for others. I love the rawness of it at the start. and I feel like I'm beginning to get a little bit closer to that again. But very much right now, just trying to do the best I can from a learning perspective, to not only for skill, like studying, I suppose, skill acquisition for myself, so that I do a better job of transferring that to others, because there's too much for us to know, right? So trying to do what John Will did very well in terms of helping his students learn to be good learners, and trying to pass that on to my members.
Amazing. Well,
Awesome.
thank you so much, man. Really appreciate you coming on today.
That was great. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Wonderful.
I'm so moved by who you are, brother. Thanks so much. Have a great one. We'll see you soon.
Cheers. Thank you.
Sorry. Bye.
Bye.